Teenagers of Reddit, have you ever had a teacher so dumb you questioned how they got the job as a teacher? Story 1. Holy, I've needed this outlet. I had a teacher for my freshman year of high school. Now I know every student hates a teacher, but this was different. She was a math teacher, who accused everybody of cheating. I was in an honors class with my best friend and we were comparing answers on a packet that she graded and passed back. Me and him had similar answers, but different grades on, for example, question 5, we would both answer A, except he got it right, and I didn't. We asked her why and she just started screaming at us, accusing us of cheating, even though the paper was already passed back. This is only one instance. She took students' papers away and trashed them for no reason time over time, and she seemed to target my friend. My friend had all A's, a strict mother who wouldn't accept anything below a B, and he is in my eyes, a genius. Our teacher treated him so shitty that he literally tried to kill himself because of the snowball effect of getting bad grades and his mom treating him badly. Not to mention, she thinks she is a wizard and threatened to get her wand on us. She sat on 2 chairs because she was so large that one wasn't enough. And her students once made a petition to get rid of her. Sorry if I sound like I'm rambling. I'm using this thread to rant. Story 2. My history teacher told a class of future engineers that airplanes were only able to fly because they were built in a cross shape. You can imagine the laughter that ensued when they realized she was not joking. Story 3. Took some entry histories G course my first year of college. The first words out of the professor's mouth was, I know this is an entry history course most of you are taking as a requirement for another field, but I'm going to make this course so difficult. Most if not all of you are going to fail or drop out. Yeah, I walked out and signed up for a different history course to satisfy the requirement. Got an A. Story 4. I had an older chemistry teacher in high school, probably about 50 to 60, that was just about oblivious to everything around him. Aside from just being totally disorganized in the order he taught things. So most of his lectures made no sense as we didn't have context as to what came before. Hey race, just a general list of his escapades. Kids would be lighting up metal tongs on the Bunsen burners and fight each other with them. One kid got a nipple flap in his shirt. That was pretty funny. One kid would dump all the chemicals he got a hold of in a beaker in the far corner of the classroom after each experiment. He was so inept at teaching that once on a test that he never really taught material for, was caught handing out random grades to all the students. Often did homework the same way, as some kids didn't even turn theirs in and would get A's and B's. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff, but that's the brunt of it. Not sure what happened to him, as that was my last class my senior year. Story 5. In my freshman year of high school, my chem teacher went on maternity leave, and the long-term sub was nothing short of A. Not only did he not know half the material he needed to teach, he spent an entire 80-minute class period once lecturing us on why global warming isn't real. Edit. This teacher taught us through some amateur tutor's YouTube channel for a good 50 of the course. Edit 2. Just to clarify, this guy was a retired physics and chemistry teacher who was certified and had experience teaching the subject. There's not really an excuse for his cluelessness. Story 6. Yes, some professors too. Most memorable was my ed in Eastern Europe not so long after CCCP fell. According to my teacher, you climax because of temperature, thus rubbing your pee-pee makes you. Even as a kids we realized it's bullshit, is a myth and is a sin anyway. Allegedly, I've got good education by world standards. If that is true, I'm afraid to know how low the bar is set. My 7th grade social studies teacher, public school, Indiana, asserted that Mahatma Gandhi was a Christian who converted from Islam. I didn't even bother to try and correct her. Crazy like this came out of her mouth almost every day and I got sick of trying to address it because the principals didn't care either. She also had a large nativity scene on her desk that took up over a third of it. Welcome to Indiana, where incompetent teaching religious proselytizing go hand in hand. Story 7. She wasn't dumb but she never liked to teach. She literally slept during lecture. She only gave tons of homework and didn't even teach how it's done. But when our principal used to come to check, she used to suddenly start acting like she was the best teacher ever so that she doesn't get fired. That way even we couldn't make any complaints. Good. I finished my school. Story 8. At least 5 times. I wouldn't call them dumb, just not professional enough. Substitutes don't count I assume, but every English teacher I've had except for one, didn't speak English properly. I'm in a French province of Canada. I always end up being praised for being bilingual, but like, you studied in this in university. My 3rd English teacher once asked me to stay after class to read a letter she wrote for a retiring coworker in English to check if there were any mistakes that honestly made me laugh afterwards. We hardly learn anything in English. Most of the time, it's just French storytelling and talking. Good job. Story 9. My year 10 physics teacher, 9th grade. Physics was my weakest subject throughout school, so I tended to ask quite a few questions. I would always try working it out by myself first, by using the 2 books we were given, but sometimes had to go ask the teacher. BC, I just wasn't getting it. She would always tell me to refer back to my book. What does the book say? Hold on, let me look in the book. How did you become a physics teacher if you can't explain anything without a book? It got to the point where I stopped asking her anything. BC, she was zero help. Story 10. One of my first days at my new school, our year 5 teacher was reading Treasure Island to us and one of the characters had a saber cut scar on his face. She said that it was from a saber-toothed tiger. I piped up and said something like, that's nonsense, saber-toothed tigers are extinct. Her response, Treasure Island was written a long time ago. Story 11. Yeah, a math teacher I have does this thing where if they forget to check homework or anything they put a 0 in for it, so then my parents see it, and then I get in trouble for the teacher's stupid mistakes. I also had a teacher that said medication can't help your ADHD. It's just an excuse, and I had to try best not to simultaneously yell and laugh my off. Story 12 happens all the time where I go to school RN in a third world country, because it's a school that doesn't pay teachers very well, meaning we are always short on teachers, meaning we will accept anybody to teach even if they have no idea what they are teaching. So we had one person who might have been a criminal or something because he changed his nationality and his name and came here to work even though our school doesn't pay him. Now he left. Probably on the run. Oh yeah, and don't get me started on a flat-earther physics teacher. Story 13. My history teacher argued with me for about an hour. He was teaching us WW2. He was saying that Japan never took part, English education system in a nutshell, people. Story 14. I had an English teacher who was absurdly sheltered and dumb. She was in her 60s and I think she had no contact with the outside world. This was a college-level ESL English as a second language class. English is not my first language, but I was already fluent by then. She was teaching us business jargon one day, and she said a multiplex was a cinema room with a screen on each wall. Yes, really, and you sat at a table and you could turn around and watch whatever movie you wanted. Predictably, everyone started talking at the same time and saying that was not how a multiplex worked, and she kept denying it. We asked her how would you deal with the different soundtracks, and if you had to pay for 4 tickets, and she said she didn't know, she had never been to one, but that's how they worked. I guess you could wear headphones. She got really mad and ended up walking out of the class. She complained to the dean and we all got told off for questioning a teacher. Yes, really. I tuned out her voice for the rest of the year and just read books. Her English was also pretty awful, lots of syntax mistakes. I have no idea how she got the job. Story 15. I had a teacher in needlework. She was gone for literal months, and there was so few teachers in needlework in Sweden, so we had no substitute, and therefore we had no lessons that hour. One lesson she was here and we did a test. Whatever score we got, that test was our final grade, and I don't know why she is still teaching to this very day. Story 16. My science teacher thought Galileo's telescope was a space telescope, and my chemistry teacher was so clumsy, she dropped mercury container and spilled hydrochloric acid in my class. I heard she broke some other and experiments went wrong. No one died or seriously injured, but I don't know how she got that job, hold that job, or stayed alive. Story 17. I had this one computer science teacher who had absolutely no idea what he was doing. We had to tell him what to do half the time, as he'd be taking these long roundabout ways of doing very simple stuff. Story 18. I was showing my best mate some things about India once. Since I'm half Indian, my BFF wants to know a little more about it. Then we came to religions and showed him some of them and their symbols. In case you don't know, Hitler adopted the swastika from these symbols. Then one of our teachers comes over and tells us to go away from all that Nazi stuff. And I explained to her that it's just some Indian religions, and then she answers, well then there must be a lot of Nazis there. I've never wanted to speak to her since, and am glad that I don't have her anymore. Story 19. Once a teacher told us that if we were absent we should just get the notes from another student, and then proceeded to make her notes in such a way that if we weren't present in class, we could not be able to understand them. She would not explain them to us if we weren't there, and she just expected us to show up no matter what. Another teacher told a student that missing for funerals was irresponsible, and that they should have planned the dates for it better. Like, Larry, that's not how that works. Story 20. Our class usually liked the religion teacher, however one time he said that he didn't believe in evolution because he doesn't identify with monkeys. Of course that's because trough evolution we became a different species. Story 21. My year 10 understanding the human body teacher, on the first day of class, he actually admitted that he was a physics teacher. I'm not saying that he was bad at physics, but I don't understand why he was teaching biology. We would sometimes ask him questions about the material, and he would usually say that he doesn't know. Most of the stuff he either got out of a textbook, without explaining it thoroughly, or he would Google it. The class average for the exams was about 55-60. Story 22. My art teacher in elementary. Whenever I would draw something, I would work my off, then she would give me about it lacking texture, shading, or it wasn't round enough for her. Keep in mind this is from kindergarten to 5th grade. It would get to the point where I was so frustrated that I was crying and she wouldn't do. She's acting like she expects us to have college art skills. She was the same with my sister as well. I hope she's not teaching anymore. What if she was, old and cranky too? Story 23. When I was 19 in university, my biology teacher who had a PhD refused to teach evolution because she was a creationist Christian. She was required to have an evolution lecture, so she had another professor come give it, but she sat in the front, and if anyone asked a question she would glare at them. I don't know how she got a degree, let alone became a college professor. Story 24. Every history teacher I had did not understand nor had a grasp on what they were teaching. We were just memorizing events. Teacher in year X, the Magna Carta was signed. Student, what was it for? Student, why did they need it? Teacher. Story 25. Not as a teenager, but in job school, my politics teacher was a joke. The only thing he did was giving us worksheets which he got from the internet probably for free, and while we tried to complete them, he was in the back of the class and did with his iPad. Most of the time he didn't even know the correct answers to the worksheets. We had one test in this class and it was about recent news. We should just watch the news to study. There was a soccer question, like what was the score of the match? Gosh, I got so mad. Thank goodness that we only had this class once every 2 weeks FO1 semester. I hated that lazy piece of Story 26 once had a woman supply teacher, I think, try to tap the touchscreen whiteboard in our classroom for some kind of presentation. This was a while ago. I was like 10, so I'm a bit hazy on the details. Except it wasn't a touchscreen whiteboard at all, it was a projected image on a whiteboard. She was just poking a whiteboard, and we all found it pathetic. Story 27 not my teacher, but my friend has a long-term sub, said sub never actually teaches. Instead, she yells at the class and then just does the work. A lot of kids have to go on Google and YouTube for help. Story 28 little context. I'm from the Philippines and English isn't the native language but is almost as widely used in the country. In fact, the Philippines is one of the countries who speak the language fluently along with native speakers. But oh god, I had this teacher who taught our English class in grade 10 but was almost always grammatically incorrect and spelled words wrong a lot of times. I don't judge people who have a hard time constructing a sentence in the language because, as I've said, it wasn't the mother tongue, but actually teaching it, that's a whole different level. Once, our top student at that time who was a little more advanced than the rest of us once contradicted her, but she got mad and got so defensive that she shut him up and made him sit down. We researched the lesson and found out our classmate was right. I was so frustrated that year and apparently, news flew to the administration and she got transferred the next year. It was just shitty that we had to endure a whole year with her having not a single thing learned. Story 29 there was this fat teacher that told us to run faster during recess. She was over 400 pounds and told us that we were slow. Me and my friends nicknamed her the tin can for no reason. She was fired 2 months later. Story 30 I guess I have two. I had a cooking teacher who was a bit strange, and I didn't really realize how kind of up she was until thinking about high school in retrospect. There was some of the obligatory bad teacher things. Putting stuff on tests that we didn't learn, taking points off for little to no reason, weird traditions she did when she taught us recipes that we had to copy even if it made the dish worse, blah blah blah. But upon thinking back on it, she seemed to have a weird vendetta against disabled students. There was a kid in my class, let's call him C, who definitely had some mental setbacks. She would accuse him of cheating on written parts of the tests, and when we would do the practical exams, she insisted that she had to be his cooking partner so he didn't mess up the kitchen. But the worst of these sort of offenses against C was when C was making a cookie cake and got excited about the Batman logo he was making in frosting on the cake. He was very vocal about how he was proud of how his design was coming along when the teacher came over and said C cut that out and took his frosting. His decoration was left half done and probably got points off for unfinished decoration. It was really up how she treated him. Then there was me. I'm a type 1 diabetic, which for those of you that don't know, is different from type 2 and cannot be brought on by poor eating or weight. My body simply decided to attack my pancreas, and so now I have to monitor my blood sugar levels to make sure I don't die. Type 1 is with me for life, is incurable, and I have to wear machines on my body that help with management. Whenever I had to do anything related to my disability, the teacher would insist I had to go into the back laundry room to do it, whether it was checking my blood sugar or giving myself insulin. I didn't think much of it at the time until now realizing I had an accommodation on my 500 for saying I didn't have to leave the room. She also once made an offhand comment to me about eating better and that would cure my diabetes. Thanks, I'll be sure to look into pancreas repairing beets someday. My other one is my 5th grade teacher, who to this day am convinced was a mass hallucination me and my classmates had. She was a very small woman, smaller than some of the 5th graders she taught. Despite this she would do everything in her power to intimidate us, even if that meant climbing on her desk and screaming. One time she tried to give me a detention for leaning back in my chair, not much more about that. Also during science lessons she would call simulations stimulations. The real kicker was that one time she accused a kid of having a messy desk. These were the ones that had little cubby holes underneath them, bigger than a drawer and were just kinda open, and as a follow-up to this, she picked up the kid's desk without warning, tipped it and dumped all of his on the floor, tossed the desk to the side, and yelled clean IT at the kid while pointing at the pile on the floor. Pretty sure the kid cried, can't remember for sure. TLDR1 was super prejudiced against the disabled, and another was a very angry halfling. Story 31 I had an English teacher insist to me Lord of the Rings was an allegory for World War II. She would not change her stance when I showed her the foreword in my 2nd edition written by Tolkien himself. As for any inner meaning or message, it has in the intention of the author none. It is neither allegorical nor topical. Story 32 years ago in high school I adds the science teacher who was completely useless. He spent every lesson reading from a textbook and having us copy it down. After about half a year he disappeared and we were given a decent sub. Turns out he wasn't even a teacher and had got the job because nobody ever checked his background. He ended up getting arrested where we finally found out he was a con man. Story 33 I've seen a comment about this on another post, but this also happened to me. We were in geography and revising for a test we had. Our teacher pointed to England and said this is London. The capital of it is England, and I just couldn't hold in my laugh. Story 34 Not a teenager now, but when I was in 8th grade, my science teacher mused, it makes you wonder how they never bump into stars when they go into space. Story 35 My French teacher only spoke Spanish and asked us students grade 8 at the time for help with her French. It was wild. I also had a teacher in high school that fought with a Jewish student about which foods were considered kosher food and non-kosher food. Pretty sure the student knew what's up. That lady was nuts. Currently have a professor in college that is so freaking disorganized it's ridiculous. Having a hard time figuring out how and why she is still a prof. She's like 60 and had no idea smartphones can take pictures. She was mind blown when we were taking pictures of the day's lecture. Story 36. I have a graphic design class, took it because I was told it was easy. The teacher literally believes the moon landing was fake, thinks the earth is flat, and doesn't even teach. He uploads YouTube Photoshop tutorials to Google Classroom and essentially just says follow the tutorial and turn it in. I'm more concerned with the fact that we're not his only class. Story 37. 6th grade of a pre-K-8. First year they decided that 6th wouldn't be a part of the rotating teachers except Science. 78 got separate science, math, English and history. She was a kindergarten teacher the year before, and she was the only candidate. Other choices were the principal, a useless administrator who couldn't handle a classroom, or a parent would have sucked, but oh well, it turned into practically a daycare. Kids brought in stuffed animals, built a pyramid in the back out of mural paper that people would just get into randomly during the day. We watched cartoons at 3. I hated her and let her know it. Useless, stupid. I learned nothing that year, and the science teacher that year was the worst teacher the school hired in the 12 years I was there. Most overqualified idiot ever. Mrs. P and Mrs. H, the worst teachers I've ever had. Easily tops the alcoholic Latin teacher who would come in hungover in high school, and the college calc prof who couldn't speak English. We had a year 12 calculus teacher who added 7 and 5 and got 14. Her eyes went in completely different directions, and she gave a kid detention because she failed to provide a chair for him, so he sat on a textbook covering the top of the rubbish bin, and the bin collapsed. Story 38. Not a teenager anymore, but I had a gem of a teacher when I was in school. Mrs. Rockforbrains was previously a home EC teacher but somehow snagged the world geography job when our school ended the home EC program. In the first day of class she was asking grade 10 students general geography questions. My absolute mind melter of a question was how many continents are there? Then the following exchange occurred: me 7, teacher no, there are only 5. Me I am pretty certain there are 7, teacher okay, name them. Me lists all 7 continents, teacher wrong. Europe is part of Asia and Antarctica is an ocean. At the insistence of a couple dozen kids, she eventually consulted the textbook and admitted defeat. Story 39. Where do I even begin? When I was 7, teacher and dogs are me omnivore. Teacher no, they are carnivore. Me but I saw on TV that they have teeth used to chew vegetables like us and that a little bit of vegetables and fruits are good for them. Teacher mad as then give him meat and see if it doesn't eat at me. Yeah. They are omnivore so they will eat it too. She didn't have me the good behavior chocolate that week when I was 12, or so we had a hellish teacher that talked way too much about religion and torture for someone who doesn't reach the subject. We actually started asking deep religious questions when we weren't in the mood to study, cause he would waste the whole class talking about it, and we could do whatever quietly. He once got freaking mad like mad when a girl said Happy Easter to him because there is no happiness in Jesus dying. He also called the same student a lesbian for sitting on the lap of her friend. Told her to stop it or people would talk. In my country that amount of skinship is pretty okay. And she was a kid, had a teacher in college who would just talk about prostitutes every class. No reason, no provocation, just say something about prostitutes in the middle of the lecture. She was a woman, but this is still creepy. Another teacher said we should answer the tests in the most direct way possible. 15 lines max. Got my test back with a ochreish grade because it lacks details. The only person who got the full points did a 2-page detailed and redundant essay. He talked about how he wanted it short for weeks before the test and literally right before it. I hate this pig. Story 40. Oh yeah, we had a grade 12 English teacher that had absolutely no clue what she was doing. All she did was talk about her little dogs. The only real assignment we got was to pick a book from the library and write a report on every chapter and hand it in at the end of the semester. And by then end of the semester she had totally forgotten about it, which was a good thing because nobody did it, haha. Story 41. Having been a student and a teacher and a parent, I've concluded 10 of teachers are great, 20 are good, 40 are fair, 20 are bad and 10 are terrible. I would rank myself as fair as I only taught 2 years and didn't get up to the good range. Teachers get little training and the poor students are the ones who suffer. They get experimented on, essentially. I feel bad that my students didn't have a more experienced teacher. I did the best I could, but knowing material and teaching it are very different, and most of a teacher's time can be spent in classroom management. I taught at a school where a lot of the kids had parents that didn't care about education. Story 42. My teacher tried to press the smartboard, except the projection was coming off the screen a little bit. She was pressing the wall for a minute before she realized. She also once locked the door from the inside so we couldn't leave after the bell. She spent 10 minutes sitting there before taking attendance because she didn't do it during class. The next day we were in an assembly about how we were late. The B word had the audacity to say she doesn't understand how we can be late. They took away our lockers because of that. Story 43. Yes, this was back when I was in elementary school. We had this one teacher that was kinda dumb. One day one of the students asked her, "Have you ever seen a narwhal?" or something around the lines of that, but she processed to say that they are not real. The student said look one up on Google. She did. When she saw the images and held her statement by saying that they aren't real and that they are probably photoshopped. Story 44. I had a teacher in elementary school that didn't know basic math. I couldn't ask her for help because of that and had to figure it on my own, then teach my teacher math. I never understood how she got the job. Story 45. I had a sociology teacher who told the class if a nuke went off to close the curtains cause it blocked the radiation to the earth is actually more flat than round, and they're building an elevator to Australia 3 you only get so many sneezes and you die when you use them up now to this day if he was an actual moron or a brilliant troll. He never ever said he was kidding, but I just can't believe he was totally serious. Story 46. Not a teenager but man, I had teacher in middle school teaching algebra. Mind you, this was an advanced class. She was the biggest ever. 60 of the kids failed her class. Personally, she threw my notebook across the classroom for not writing it in her format in the first week of school despite all the work being shown and answers circled. After that instance I gave 0 in that class among others and refused to do any work in class. Needless to say she was fired the next year despite all her credentials. See ADR Brown. Story 47. Had one in my day. She tried to fail my final project because she didn't like me or the topic. Luckily I was a smart enough brat to go to the administration. I had to present to a separate faculty member and she got put on administrative leave, had an idiot prof in college for basic dynamics. He spent an entire class doing the proof for the Pythagorean theory, then tested us on projectile motion, failed the entire class. I went to the administration, again, and they freaking told him what students came forward, discovered he was failing me on correct answers because he knew I reported him. Took the evidence to the administration again and called a meeting with the head of mathematics, our dean, and him. They booted him. Lesson here: use your resources because you are not powerless as a kid. Story 48. One of my friend's teachers in freshman year had a teacher whose mental sanity was questionable. He would catcall female students in the hallway, throw textbooks at students if they weren't paying complete attention, and would wear the school uniform that was only required for students. He finally got moved schools after a group of parents complained. By as far as I know he is still teaching. Story 49. Not a teen anymore, but my senior year I took a drama class. I had fun in that class over summer school, took for extra credits, so I would have less to do senior year, only needed 4 credits that year. It was awesome, so I figured it would be fun. Wrong. He ended up being the worst teacher I had at that school. I was part of the first play that year, Oz. I was just a random Emerald City citizen with one line. He kept having extra practices that were mandatory without telling me. And honestly, if I have 2 appearances in the entire showing, I don't need to show up for more than half to get what I'm doing right. At the start of class the day after the last for me practice, I should mention that these double practices would have me at the school from about 7:30 a.m. to nearly 10 o'clock p.m., but he gives me a note telling me that I missed too many practices to be in the final production. Literally handed me the note instead of saying it directly to me. Anytime someone goofed off a little too much and accidentally disturbed the class, he would go on about how it's my time just like me, hand from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and we need to not waste his time. I could go on, but thinking back on it makes me angry, and am trying not to be had an English teacher when I went to Canada that would teach us about chemtrails, that the USA would use that to change the weather. Also, he would talk about how they were working with aliens to infiltrate the government, and that they installed a retina scan on the border to insert mind control chips into your brain. I wish I was joking. Story 50. My biology teacher last year explained things in the most complicated manner. Then she would give out all these worksheets and projects in which the directions didn't make any sense. We would do it, then it turned out to be completely wrong even though we did it the exact way she taught it. She also gave an autistic kid for when he took a break then came back too late, which really, he did come in at the time she said. Everyone was there when she told him to come back at the specified time. Everyone checked the time and he was back at the specified time, but she was lying and was saying she never said that. Story 51. One of my teachers was in charge of a required class that had no real description. It was something vague like career life planning or something. So throughout the course of the semester she gains quite the reputation for being utterly brain-dead. So here are some highlights. She frequently went on tirades about topics focused on things completely separate from the topics we were supposed to get over with. Most often she talked about herself or shared stories of her experiences that often lacked depth or any real meaning, and only served to demonstrate how little self-awareness she had. She also sometimes likes to pose empty questions about current events and such. The most ridiculous one was about a man who was in court for something it was rather minor, if memory serves, who refused to speak in a language that the judge could understand despite being fully able to communicate with the judge easily, and was punished as a result. She framed it as some story of oppression and injustice, while most of the class were opposed to this, say how there was literally no reason to refuse to communicate and the judge had to do something to him if he absolutely refused to comply. She was baffled that nobody was buying her sob story and spent the entire rest of the class arguing about it. She was frequently missing from classes and would often bring in a sub. During these days, we completely deviated from the intended unit and we had to do some bookwork rather than listen to her ramblings. Problem is these books were decades old and had absolutely all to do with literally anything. Apparently replacing them had never occurred her in the years upon years that she had them. The only thing they provided for me in terms of new or useful info was the difference in graphic design and culture of today to the 90s, as all the info in there was grossly outdated. She made it apparent that she both believes in the Illuminati, and B thinks that people with tattoos should be treated with suspicion because they might have Illuminati membership tattoos. I'm not making that up. I initially dismissed it on form of a joke and she confirmed it by saying it's something to take seriously. I will take this moment to remind you that this was part of this required class that all students needed to take before graduating. She once dismissed the class like 5 minutes early and tried to give those detention to those who left after being dismissed, but apparently she forgot both that she had dismissed us early and that she had issued detention. Did I mention she was stupid? There's probably more from her, but that's all that I can remember right now. Story 52. When I was a freshman in high school, there was this teacher named Ms. Tsai, and we all hated her. She would put her favorite students in the center of the room, and the ones she didn't like on this U-shaped ring around them. I was in the outside. No one on the outside had a grade higher than an F. We would ask for help and she would say things like look in the book or ask your neighbor, but a kid in the middle would ask for help and she would walk over and help them. I tried telling a school counselor, but no one believed me. I failed first semester and they wouldn't move me to another teacher, so I gave up on math my freshman year. I stopped doing anything and refused to take tests because I'm already going to fail. She one time got mad at me just sitting there not disturbing the class and sent me to another teacher's room. While I was there I was participating and learning the material, so when I came back to Ms. Tsai and did it how the other teacher taught me, she didn't like it because it's not my way, so it's wrong when it was clearly correct. I failed freshman math and my counselor didn't believe I could do math, so for the rest of high school I was stuck doing algebra. I hate algebra now. I did it for freshman and sophomore year, some integrated algebra JR, and geometry senior year. I eventually found out she quit, but we always assumed she was let go.